Celeste Rivers stood before the shimmering gateway between worlds, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a trapped bird. The portals swirled with colors that had no names in human language, casting strange shadows across her determined face. In her backpack, she carried everything she might need for a quick expedition. Collection jars, her research notebook, rope, and the half-burned journal that had once belonged to Professor Harlan Webb, her mentor who had vanished into this very portal 3 years ago. The air around the gateway hummed with energy that made her skin tingle. Celeste adjusted the strap of her backpack and took a deep breath. She was doing this for a reason that went beyond simple curiosity or adventure. Her younger sister Roslyn lay in a hospital bed back home, suffering from a disease that no human medicine could cure. But according to Professor Webb's notes, there existed a flower in the dragon realm called the Everbloom that could heal any illness. It was her only hope. Into the dragon realm the moment Celeste stepped through the portal, the world transformed around her. The sky above was not blue, but a deep violet streaked with silver clouds that moved like living creatures. The ground beneath her feet was covered in moss that glowed softly with bioluminescence, creating a carpet of gentle light. Massive trees with bark that looked like twisted metal reached toward the strange sky, their leaves shimmering with an inner fire. Celeste pulled out her notebook and began sketching the flora around her, her scientific mind cataloging everything despite the danger she knew she faced. Dragons were not known for welcoming human visitors. In fact, the last documented human to enter their realm and return alive had been Professor Webb. And even he had come back changed, speaking in riddles about connections between species that went deeper than anyone understood. A sound like thunder rolling across mountains made Celeste freeze. She looked up slowly, her breath catching in her throat. Perched on a crystalline outcropping above her was a dragon unlike anything she had imagined from the old stories. His scales were the color of polished obsidian, but when he moved, they reflected light in shades of deep purple and midnight blue. His eyes were molten amber, fixed on her with an intelligence that was distinctly unsettling. The guardian appears. The dragon descended from his perch with surprising grace for a creature so massive. Each movement was deliberate and powerful. When he landed, the ground trembled slightly beneath Celeste's feet. She forced herself to stand tall, refusing to show the fear that coursed through her veins. A human, the dragon spoke, his voice resonating in her mind rather than through sound. The telepathic communication was startling but clear. In 3 centuries of guarding this border, I have seen only 5 of your kind dare to cross. 4 never left. The 5th left his sanity behind. My name is Celeste Rivers, she said, proud that her voice remained steady. I'm here seeking the Everbloom flower. My sister is dying, and it's the only thing that can save her. The dragon's eyes narrowed, studying her with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. I am Thornix, guardian of the Western Vale. The Everbloom grows only in the heart of the Crimson Gardens. 3 days' journey from here through territories far more dangerous than you can imagine. Why should I not simply end your intrusion now and save you the suffering of what lies ahead? Celeste reached into her pocket and pulled out Professor Webb's burned journal, holding it up. Because Harlan Webb was my teacher. He came here years ago and wrote about connections between our species that no one believed. He wrote about you, Thornix. He said you were different from the others. That you understood things about humans that other dragons refused to see. Unexpected recognition, something shifted in Thornix's expression, a flicker of what might have been surprise or recognition. He moved closer, his massive head lowering to examine the journal. His hot breath washed over Celeste, smelling of smoke and something like cinnamon. Harlan Webb, Thornix repeated, his mental voice softer now. The human scholar who spent a year among us, learning our ways and teaching us about yours. He was the first human I did not wish to destroy on sight. What happened to him? He came back changed, Celeste said quietly. He wrote constantly about what he'd learned here, but the scientific community thought he'd lost his mind. 6 months after his return, he went back through the portal and never came back. We assumed he'd died. Thornix was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes searching hers. Harlan Webb is not dead. He lives in the sanctuary of lost souls, a place where those who no longer fit in either world find refuge. He chose to remain here because he discovered something that changed everything he thought he knew about the boundaries between species. Celeste's heart leaped. He's alive? Can you take me to him? The path to the sanctuary passes near the Crimson Gardens, Thornix said slowly, as if making a decision he wasn't entirely comfortable with. Against my better judgment and centuries of training that tells me humans bring only trouble, I will guide you. But understand this, Celeste Rivers, the journey ahead will test you in ways you cannot imagine. The Dragon Realm is not kind to your kind. The journey begins. As they began walking, Celeste couldn't help but steal glances at her unexpected guide. Thornix moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large. His scales caught the light of the violet sky, creating patterns that were almost hypnotic. She noticed scars along his flanks, evidence of battles fought and survived. "Why are you helping me?" Celeste asked after they had walked in silence for some time. Thornix was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his mental voice held a note of uncertainty. "Because Harlan Webb taught me that perhaps the old hatreds between our kinds are based on misunderstandings. And because there is something about you that reminds me of why I once believed bridges could be built between worlds." The landscape around them began to change as they traveled deeper into the Dragon Realm. The glowing moss gave way to fields of flowers that sang soft melodies when the wind passed through them. Crystals jutted from the ground like frozen fountains, refracting light into rainbow patterns. Strange creatures watched them from the shadows, some curious, others clearly hostile. As the violet sky began to darken into something like night, though different from Earth's darkness, Thornix led them to a cave carved into the side of a cliff. Inside, the walls were lined with the same bioluminescent moss, providing gentle illumination. "We rest here tonight," Thornix announced. "Tomorrow, we enter the territories where other dragons patrol. Not all of them share my willingness to tolerate human presence." Campfire conversations. Celeste set up a small camp, while Thornix curled his massive form near the cave entrance, creating a living barrier against anything that might try to enter. She pulled out some dried food from her pack and began to eat, her mind racing with everything she had seen and experienced in just a few hours. "Tell me about my sister's illness," Thornix said suddenly, startling her. "Why is this Everbloom flower so important?" Celeste swallowed the lump in her throat. Roslyn is 16. She has a condition that's eating away at her life force. The doctors say she has maybe 2 months left. Professor Webb wrote in his journal that the Everbloom could restore life energy itself. It's my only hope. The Everbloom is sacred to dragons, Thornix explained, his mental voice thoughtful. It blooms once every decade and is said to contain the essence of creation itself. Taking one would be considered theft of the highest order by the Dragon Council. "Then I'll face the consequences after Roslyn is healed," Celeste said firmly. "I didn't come here expecting it to be easy." Thornix studied her with those penetrating amber eyes. "You humans are strange creatures. You live such brief lives, yet you burn so brightly with determination and love. We dragons live for millennia, yet few of us would risk what you are risking for another." "Maybe that's why our brief lives matter so much," Celeste replied. "We don't have centuries to put things off. When we love someone, we have to act now, with everything we have." Something in Thornix's expression shifted, though Celeste couldn't quite read what it meant. The dragon turned his gaze toward the entrance of the cave, looking out at the strange stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Sleep, Celeste Rivers," he said softly. "Tomorrow will bring challenges enough. I will keep watch." Cess laid out her sleeping bag and settled in for the night. She found herself watching the dragon's silhouette against the cave entrance. There was something about Thornix that defied everything she had been taught, about dragons being nothing more than intelligent beasts. There was a depth to him, a complexity that made her curious in ways that had nothing to do with her mission. She fell asleep with Professor Webb's journal clutched to her chest, dreaming of violet skies and amber eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Celeste woke to the sound of distant roaring that echoed across the mountains like a morning song. The bioluminescent moss had dimmed with the coming of dawn, and strange light filtered into the cave in shades of gold and crimson. Thornix remained at the entrance, his obsidian scales now reflecting the morning light in ways that took her breath away. He had not moved from his guardian position all night. He actually stayed awake the entire night, Celeste asked, rolling up her sleeping bag. Dragons require far less sleep than humans, Thornix replied without turning, and I gave my word to protect you. A dragon's word is not given lightly. They left the cave and continued their journey through terrain that grew increasingly spectacular and dangerous. They crossed bridges made of crystal that spanned bottomless chasms, walked through forests where the trees whispered secrets in languages Celeste could not understand, and climbed slopes where volcanic vents released steam that smelled of minerals and magic around midday. They heard the sound of wings overhead. Thornix immediately pushed Celeste behind a large boulder, his body tensing. "Stay hidden and stay silent," he commanded. His mental voice urgent. An unexpected Elia dragon descended from the sky, smaller than Thornix, but no less impressive. Her scales were the color of pearls, shifting between white and soft pink in the light. Her eyes were a gentle silver that seemed kind rather than threatening. When she landed, she tilted her head curiously at Thornix. "Thornix, old friend," the pearl dragon spoke, her mental voice musical and warm. "Why are you skulking behind rocks in the middle of the day?" "This is most unlike the stern guardian of the Western Vale." Thornix stepped out reluctantly, and Celeste could sense his internal debate. "Seraphine, what brings you to the outer territories?" "Gathering dreamvine for the healing chambers," Seraphine replied. Then her silver eyes locked onto Celeste as she emerged from behind the boulder. "Oh, my stars. Is that a human? A living, breathing human in our realm?" "Her name is Celeste," Thornix said carefully. "She seeks the Everbloom to save her sister's life. I am escorting her to the Crimson Gardens." Seraphine's eyes widened with shock. "Thornix, have you lost your mind? If the Council discovers you're helping a human steal an Everbloom, they'll strip you of your guardianship and possibly your wings. Queen Valoris has been looking for any excuse to tighten restrictions since the last human incursion." "I am aware of the risks," Thornix said stiffly. Seraphine circled Celeste, examining her with frank curiosity. "I am Seraphine, keeper of the healing chambers and student of cross-species medicine. I've never seen a human this close before. You're much more delicate than I imagined. How do you survive with such fragile bodies?" "We're tougher than we look," Celeste said with a slight smile, though her heart was racing at being so closely inspected by another dragon, the healers. And Sitzerophana's expression suddenly grew serious. "Wait, there's something unusual about you, human. May I examine your energy signature?" Before Celeste could ask what that meant, Seraphine's eyes began to glow with a soft silver light. The dragon made a sound of surprise. "Thornix, do you see this? Her life force signature is resonating with yours. There are threads of connection forming between you." "That's impossible," Thornix said, but his mental voice held uncertainty. "It's not impossible. It's extraordinary," Seraphine corrected, excitement building in her voice. "I've read about this in the ancient texts. Before the Great Separation, when humans and dragons still worked together, there were documented cases of soul resonance between species. It's the foundation of what we call the heart-flame bond." Celeste looked between the two dragons, confused. "What's a heart-flame bond?" Seraphine's silver eyes gleamed with fascination. "It's a connection that forms when two souls, regardless of their physical form, recognize each other as complements. It's rarer than rare, especially between different species. In all my years studying healing magic, I've only read about it in historical texts. I never thought I'd actually witness one forming." Thornix turned away sharply. "You're mistaken. There is no bond. I am merely fulfilling a debt to Harlan Webb by helping his student." "Deny it all you want," Seraphine said with a knowing look, "but the energy signatures don't lie. This is fascinating. I'm coming with you to the Crimson Gardens. This is too important to miss." Journey through the Valley of Echoes, the three of them traveled together, and Celeste found herself grateful for Seraphine's presence. The Pearl Dragon was chatty and curious, asking endless questions about human life, culture, and medicine. She explained dragon healing techniques and showed Celeste how certain plants in their realm responded to intention and emotion rather than just chemistry. as they descended into a vast valley where sounds seemed to repeat and multiply. Creating strange harmonies, Seraphine flew ahead to scout the path. This left Celeste walking alongside Thornix, the first time they had been alone since the previous evening.
Oh.
"Do you think she's right?" Celeste asked quietly. "About this bond thing?" Thornix was silent for a long moment. "I think Seraphine is a brilliant healer who sees patterns where sometimes there are none. I have lived for 800 years, Celeste. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have fought in wars that would turn your blood cold. I have watched my own kind destroy themselves over petty disputes. I learned long ago not to form attachments." "That sounds like a lonely way to live," Celeste observed. "It is safe," Thornix corrected. "Safety is worth the price of loneliness." Celeste wanted to argue, but before she could, Seraphine's urgent mental call reached them both. "We have a problem. Dragon patrol ahead, and they've spotted me." Confrontation with the patrol, Thornix immediately positioned himself protectively in front of Celeste as 3 large dragons descended from the sky. Their scales were various shades of crimson and gold, and their eyes held none of Seraphine's kindness. The largest of them, with scales like burnished copper, landed heavily and fixed Thornix with a challenging stare. "Guardian Thornix," the copper dragon rumbled. "Interesting company you keep these days. A human? In direct violation of the Council's decree?" Commander Ravik, Thornix replied calmly. "I was not aware the decree extended to the outer territories beyond the Veil." "The decree extends to all of the Dragon Realm," Ravik growled. "You know this. Step aside and let us deal with the human intruder." "I cannot do that," Thornix said, his voice steady but firm. "She is under my protection." The 2 other patrol dragons moved to flank them, cutting off escape routes. Celeste's hand moved to her backpack.
Else.
Though she had no weapons that could possibly help against 3 massive dragons, Seraphine flew between them, her pearl scales seeming to glow brighter. "Commander Ravik, before you do something you'll regret, you should know that this human carries the signature of a heart flame bond with Guardian Thornix. Attacking her could have serious metaphysical consequences." The trial demanded Dravik's eyes narrowed dangerously. "A heart flame bond? With a human? That's even worse than simple trespassing. Thornix, you know the law. Any dragon suspected of forming forbidden bonds must face the Council's judgment. And the human must be brought before Queen Valoris." "Then we will go before the Council," Thornix said, surprising everyone, including Celeste. "But the human will not be harmed before she has a chance to plead her case." Ravik considered this, then nodded slowly. "Agreed, but we escort you to the capital. And if you try to flee, the human dies instantly." Celeste felt her stomach drop as the reality of the situation sank in. She had wanted to sneak in, get the Everbloom, and leave. Instead, she was about to be brought before the Dragon Queen and Council to face judgment for crimes she didn't fully understand as they began the journey to the Dragon capital. Flying on Seraphine's back while Thornix and the patrol flew alongside them, Celeste leaned close to the Pearl Dragon. "What happens at these council judgments?" Seraphine's mental voice was gentle but honest. "That depends on Queen Valoris. She lost her mate to human hunters 50 years ago. Since then, she has harbored deep hatred for your kind. The fact that Thornix may have formed a bond with you will be seen as the ultimate betrayal in her eyes." The Dragon capital was beyond anything Celeste could have imagined. Built into and around 7 massive mountains, it was a city of crystal spires and volcanic stone, of buildings that seemed to grow organically from the rock itself. Thousands of dragons flew between the structures, creating a constant ballet of wings and scales in the strange violet sky. At the heart of the capital stood the Hall of Flames, where the Dragon Council met. It was a massive structure that looked like a volcano frozen mid-eruption. With rivers of actual lava flowing down its sides in controlled channels, Celeste was brought before massive doors carved with scenes of dragon history, showing their ancient glory and their wars with other species, including humans. Inside the hall, the temperature was nearly unbearable. Celeste felt sweat immediately begin to pour down her face. The chamber was circular and vast, with seats carved into the walls at various heights. Dragons of all sizes and colors filled these seats. Their eyes fixed on the small human being led to the center of the room. On a throne of black stone, veined with gold, sat Queen Valoris. She was enormous, easily twice Thornix's size, with scales the color of aged bronze. Her eyes were a fierce orange like molten metal, and they burned with intelligence and barely contained rage. A jagged scar ran across her snout, a reminder of past battles. Before the Queen, Queen Valoris's mental voice boomed through the chamber with such force that Celeste stumbled. A human dares to enter our realm, and not just any human, but one who has apparently ensnared one of our guardians with forbidden magic. Your Majesty, Celeste began, but the Queen cut her off with a snarl. Silence. You will speak only when given permission, human. Guardian Thornix, step forward and explain yourself. Thornix moved to stand beside Celeste, his presence steady and calming despite the hostile atmosphere. Your Majesty, I encountered this human at the Western Vale. She seeks the Everbloom to save her dying sister. She carries the journal of Harlan Webb and came in peace, not as an invader. Harlan Webb Valorius spat the name. The human who stole our secrets and filled his journals with lies about cooperation between our species, and now his student comes to steal our most sacred flower. The pattern of human treachery continues. Seraphine stepped forward bravely. Your Majesty, if I may speak, I have examined both the human and Guardian Thornix. There are signs of a genuine heart-flame bond forming between them. This is not magic or trickery. It is a natural resonance of compatible souls. A murmur ran through the assembled dragons. Queen Valoris leaned forward, her enormous bulk shifting on the throne. A heart-flame bond? With a human? Impossible. Such bonds have not existed since the age before the Great Separation. You must be mistaken, healer. I am not mistaken, Your Majesty, Seraphine said firmly. The energy signatures are clear. This is exactly as the ancient texts describe. The Queen's challenge, Queen Valoris, was silent for a long moment, her orange eyes moving between Thornix and Celeste with an expression that was difficult to read. Finally she spoke, and her mental voice was cold as ice despite the heat in the chamber. It's very well. If this heart-flame bond is real, then let it be tested. There is an ancient trial for such claims. The trial of shared flame. Both the dragon and the human must enter the chamber of first fire and survive the ordeal together. If the bond is true, they will emerge unharmed. If it is false, well, humans burn quite easily. Celeste felt her blood run cold, but before she could speak, Thornix stepped forward. We accept the trial. Thornix, no, Celeste whispered urgently. You don't have to do this. Thornix turned to look at her, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in those amber eyes. Yes, I do. Because whether I wanted to admit it or not, Seraphine was right. There is something between us, something I have never felt before in 8 centuries of existence, and I would rather face any trial than deny that truth. Queen Valoris rose from her throne. Then let the trial begin at sunset. If you survive, human, you may take your Everbloom and leave. And Guardian Thornix, if you both survive. I will consider that perhaps the old ways of separation between our kinds deserve to be reconsidered. But if you fail, your ashes will join the countless others who have dared to challenge dragon law. As guards led them to preparation chambers, Celeste's mind raced. She had come here for her sister, for the Everbloom. She had never expected to find herself connected to a dragon in ways she didn't fully understand. And now, both their lives depended on a bond that had barely begun to form in the preparation chamber. With only a few hours until sunset, Celeste sat beside Thornix's massive form. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I never meant to drag you into this. You didn't drag me, Thornix replied. I made my choice. From the moment I decided to help you instead of turning you away at the Vale, I knew this path might lead here, and I find that I do not regret it. As the violet sun began its descent toward the horizon, Celeste realized that whatever happened in the chamber of first fire, her life would never be the same. She had crossed into the dragon realm seeking a cure for her sister. What she had found was something far more complex and dangerous than she ever imagined. She had found a connection that transcended species and challenged everything both their worlds believed about the boundaries between them. Sunset painted the dragon capital in shades of crimson and gold that seemed to set the very air ablaze. Celeste and Thornix were led through winding corridors deep into the heart of the mountain, descending into chambers so ancient that the stone itself seemed to pulse with primal energy. The heat intensified with every step until Celeste felt like she was walking into a furnace, the chamber of first. Fire was a spherical room carved from black volcanic glass. In its center burned a flame unlike anything Celeste had seen. It was not red or orange, but a white-blue color that hurt to look at directly. The flame danced without fuel, suspended in midair, radiating power that made the hair on Celeste's arms stand on end. Queen Valoris stood at the entrance with dozens of council members. Her orange eyes reflected the strange flame as she addressed them. The rules of the trial are ancient and absolute. Both of you must enter the flame together. If your bond is true, the fire will recognize your connection and allow you to merge with its essence. You will experience each other's deepest truths, your fears, your hopes, your very souls laid bare. If the bond is false or forced, the flame will consume you both. How long do we need to stay in the fire? Celeste asked, her voice barely steady. Until the flame releases you, Valoris replied. It could be moments or hours. Time moves differently within first fire. Are you prepared? Celeste looked at Thornix, seeing her own fear reflected in his amber eyes. But she also saw determination in something else. Something that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. We're ready, Thornix said. Into the flame they walked forward together. Celeste's small human form beside Thornix's massive dragon body. As they approached the flame, Celeste felt its pull like gravity drawing them in. She reached out instinctively, and her hand found purchase on Thornix's foreleg. The moment their skin made contact with scales, the flame surged. The fire enveloped them, and Celeste braced for pain that never came. Instead, she felt a rush of sensation unlike anything she had experienced. She was simultaneously herself and not herself. She could feel Thornix's heartbeat as if it were her own. Feel the ancient power that flowed through his veins. Sense the weight of 8 centuries of memories pressing against her consciousness, and Thornix felt her in return. The fierce love she held for her sister Roslyn, the determination that had driven her across dimensional boundaries, the loneliness she had carried since their parents died 5 years ago, leaving her as Roslyn's only family. He felt her fear, her courage, her stubborn refusal to give up, even when all seemed lost. Shared memories, the flame showed them visions, pulling memories from both their minds and weaving them together. Celeste saw Thornix as a young dragon, barely a century old, watching humans from afar with curiosity rather than hatred. She felt his wonder at human creativity, their ability to build and dream despite their brief lifespans. She witnessed the moment when he had been chosen as a guardian, taking an oath to protect the boundaries between worlds. Then the memories turned darker. She experienced the day Thornix had watched human hunters kill his friend, a gentle dragon named Meridian who had advocated for peace between species. She felt his rage, his grief, and his decision to lock away his emotions behind walls of duty and isolation. Thornix, in turn, saw Celeste's memories. He watched through her eyes as a 10-year-old girl received news that her parents had been killed in an accident. He felt her determination to raise Roslyn alone, sacrificing her own dreams to keep her sister safe. He experienced the devastating moment when doctors told her that Roslyn had only months to live, and the desperate hope that had ignited when she discovered Professor Webb's journal. The flame burned away. Pretense and show them to each other without filters or walls. And in that absolute vulnerability, something extraordinary happened. The bond between them, which had been forming since their first meeting, solidified into something unbreakable. The truth revealed, but the flame was not done with them. It pulled them deeper, showing them visions of the past and future. They saw the age before the Great Separation, when dragons and humans had worked together, building wonders that combined magic and ingenuity. They saw the wars that had torn the alliance apart, driven by fear and misunderstanding on both sides. And then they saw something that made them both gasp in recognition. They saw Harlan Webb standing in this very chamber years ago, beside a dragon with scales like sunset. Professor Webb and his dragon companion had faced this same trial and survived. The flame showed them that Webb had not gone mad when he returned to Earth. He had tried to share the truth about the bond he had formed, proof that humans and dragons could connect on the deepest level. But his world had rejected him, called him crazy, and eventually he had returned to the dragon realm to live with his bonded companion in exile. The flame released them suddenly, and they collapsed on the floor of the chamber, gasping for breath. Celeste felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by everything she had experienced. Beside her, Thornix's massive form shuddered as he processed 800 years of walls crumbling in the span of what felt like mere moments. Aftermath of fire silence filled the chamber. Queen Valorius stared at them, her expression unreadable. The assembled council members whispered among themselves, their mental voices creating a background hum of confusion and astonishment. Finally, Valorius spoke, her mental voice carrying none of its earlier hostility. The flame has spoken. The heart-flame bond is genuine. I have not seen such a thing in my lifetime, and I am over 1,000 years old. She paused, and something like pain crossed her bronze features. Perhaps I have been wrong to let my grief over my lost mate blind me to the possibility that not all humans are our enemies. Seraphine flew down from her observation perch, her silver eyes shining with excitement and tears. This is momentous. Do you realize what this means? The ancient bonds can still form. The bridges between our species are not permanently broken. But before celebration could begin, a roar of rage echoed through the chamber. A massive dragon with scales like dried blood forced his way through the assembled crowd. His eyes were black pits of hatred, and when he spoke, his mental voice dripped with venom. This is an abomination. The Crimson Dragon bellowed. I am Darius Crimsonwing, and I speak for those who remember the true cost of trusting humans. They killed my entire clan, slaughtered them for their scales and bones. And now we're supposed to celebrate because one weak guardian has been seduced by human tricks? The rebels challenged. Rias landed heavily in the center of the chamber, his attention fixed on Thornix and Celeste. I challenge the validity of this so-called bond. I claim the right of combat to prove that this human is nothing more than a manipulative invader who has used forbidden magic to ensnare Guardian Thornix. Queen Valorius raised a clawed hand. Darius, the flame has already judged them true. There is no further proof needed. Then I challenge them both to defend their bond through action, not fire tricks, Darius snarled. Let them prove their connection has value beyond sentiment. Let them face the maze of mirrors and emerge with the heart flame crystal, the artifact that can permanently seal their bond and prove to all of dragonkind that such unions have purpose. Murmurs rippled through the council. The maze of mirrors was legendary, a test that required perfect trust and synchronization between partners. It had been used in ancient times to test bonded pairs before they were allowed to serve in positions of power. No one had attempted it in centuries. If we do this, Thornix said, his mental voice steady despite his exhaustion from the trial, you will accept the result and cease your opposition? Darius's black eyes glittered with malice. If you succeed, I will acknowledge your bond. But when you fail, and you will fail, the human dies, and you face exile for your weakness. Celeste struggled to her feet, her body still trembling from the trial of first fire. We'll do it. When do we start? Into the maze. The maze of mirrors existed in a dimension parallel to the dragon realm, accessible through a portal in the deepest chamber of the capital. As Celeste and Thornix prepared to enter, Seraphine pulled them aside. The maze responds to doubt and fear, the Pearl Dragon explained urgently. It will show you distorted reflections of yourselves and each other. The only way through is absolute trust. You must believe in your bond even when the mirrors try to convince you it's false. And the heart flame crystal? Celeste asked. It's at the center of the maze, Seraphine said. It's a physical manifestation of bonded souls formed from the essence of first fire itself. If you retrieve it and survive the journey back, it will prove beyond any doubt that your connection is real and powerful. Queen Valoris approached, her massive form casting them in shadow. I did not expect to say this to a human, but I wish you luck, Celeste Rivers. What you and Thornix have found is precious and rare. Do not let Darius's hatred destroy it. The portal to the maze shimmered before them, a swirling vortex of silver light. Celeste took a deep breath and placed her hand on Thornix's leg, drawing strength from their bond. Together, they stepped through. Reflections of doubt, the maze was disorienting from the first moment. Mirrors surrounded them on all sides, reflecting not just their physical forms, but possible versions of themselves. Celeste saw reflections showing her as she might have been, a version who had never left Earth, who had let Roslyn die rather than risk this journey. Another reflection showed her consumed with power, wielding dragon magic with cruel intent. Beside her, Thornix's reflections were equally disturbing. She saw versions of him attacking her, versions where he stood coldly by as other dragons tore her apart, versions where his eyes held nothing but contempt for humanity. Don't look at them, Thornix said urgently. Those are not us. They're possibilities that will never be. They moved forward, following a path that seemed to shift and change with every step. The mirrors began to speak, using their own voices to sow doubt. She's using you, Thornix, his reflection sneered. Humans always use dragons. She'll take what she needs and abandon you. He's a monster, Celeste, her reflection whispered. He could kill you with a thought. How can you trust something so different from yourself? Celeste squeezed her eyes shut, focusing instead on the bond she could still feel thrumming between them. I trust you, she said aloud. Whatever these mirrors show me, I know the truth. I felt your soul in the first fire. You're not a monster. You're brave and honorable, and far more compassionate than you let anyone see. Thornix's mental voice wrapped around her like a warm blanket. And you are not using me. You're one of the bravest beings I've ever encountered, willing to cross dimensions for love. That's not manipulation. That's the kind of pure devotion I had forgotten existed. The heart of the maze, as they voiced their trust, the path became clearer. The mirrors' voices grew fainter, unable to gain purchase against their certainty. They walked together through corridors that twisted impossibly, trusting each other to guide them when one or the other became disoriented. Finally, they emerged into a circular chamber at the maze's heart. Floating in the center, suspended by no visible force, was the heart flame crystal. It was roughly the size of Celeste's fist. Multifaceted like a diamond but glowing with internal fire that shifted between colors, amber like Thornix's eyes, deep brown like Celeste's, and 100 shades that seemed to represent emotions rather than simple hues. It's beautiful, Celeste whispered. It's us, Thornix replied with wonder. Can you feel it? That crystal is the physical manifestation of what exists between us. As Celeste reached for the crystal, the maze made one final attempt to break them. The mirrors around the chamber began showing visions of futures. Celeste returning to Earth with the Everbloom, never seeing Thornix again. Thornix continuing his lonely guardianship, the brief connection with Celeste becoming just another painful memory. Separate futures where they lived and died in their own worlds, the bond fading to nothing. We could still walk away, the mirrors whispered. You could each go home. It would be easier, safer. This bond will only bring you pain. Celeste's hand hovered over the crystal, doubt creeping in for the first time. Thornix, maybe they're right. I have to return to Earth with the Everbloom. You belong here. How can we maintain a bond across dimensions? Thornix moved closer, his massive head lowering until he was level with Celeste's eyes. We find a way. Because what we found in that first fire is worth fighting for. I have lived 800 years in safety and isolation, and they were empty years. These few days with you have made me feel more alive than centuries of guarding. I don't want to go back to that emptiness. The choice that changes everything, tears streamed down Celeste's face as she realized the truth. She had come here for Roslyn, yes, but she had found something she hadn't known she needed. A connection that made her feel whole in ways she never had before. The bond with Thornix filled spaces in her soul she hadn't even known were empty. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, Thornix replied. But I would rather face fear with you than face emptiness alone. Celeste took the heart flame crystal. The moment her fingers closed around it, warmth flooded through her entire body. The crystal pulsed once, twice, synchronizing with both their heartbeats. The bond between them, already strong, solidified into something that felt permanent and unbreakable. The mirrors shattered, unable to exist in the presence of such certainty. The maze itself began to dissolve, their task complete. When they emerged through the portal, back into the dragon capital's deep chamber, they found not just the council waiting, but what seemed like half the dragon population. A new beginning, Darius Crimsonwing stood at the front. His black eyes widening as he saw the heart flame crystal glowing in Celeste's hands. His expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally something that might have been grudging respect. "They did it," Seraphine announced joyfully, her pearl scales shimmering. "They retrieved the heart flame crystal. The bond is proven beyond all doubt." Queen Valoris descended from her throne, approaching Celeste and Thornix with an expression of wonder. "In all my years, I never thought I would witness the formation of a true heart flame bond, let alone between a human and a dragon. You have proven that the ancient ways are not lost, that the bridges between our kinds can be rebuilt." Darius stepped forward stiffly. "I gave my word. I acknowledge the bond." He paused, then added with obvious difficulty, "And perhaps I have let my hatred blind me to possibilities. I still do not trust Isley, but what you have accomplished today deserves recognition." The gathered dragons erupted in a cacophony of roars and mental voices, some celebrating, others still uncertain, but all acknowledging what had happened. The gift and the promised Queen Valoris raised a clawed hand for silence. "Celeste Rivers, you came to our realm seeking the Everbloom for your sister. You risked everything for love, and in doing so, you've given us something precious. Hope that our two species need not remain enemies. Therefore I grant you not just one Everbloom, but 3. One for your sister, one for study by your human healers, and one to plant as a symbol of new beginnings between our worlds." Celeste felt her knees go weak with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I don't know how to express what this means." There's more, Valoris continued. "The heart flame crystal you now possess is yours to keep. With it, you can cross between dimensions without need of the portal. You can maintain your bond regardless of which world you walk in. But understand, this makes you ambassadors whether you wish it or not. Others will look to you as examples of what is possible between humans and dragons." Thornix bowed his head respectfully. "We accept that responsibility, Your Majesty." Seraphine flew to them, practically vibrating with excitement. "I've been granted permission to establish an exchange program. Dragons who wish to learn about humans, humans who wish to learn about dragons. With you two as the first official ambassadors, this is the beginning of a new age." Returning home 3 days later, Celeste stood at the western veil with Thornix beside her, the heart flame crystal secured around her neck, and the 3 Everbloom flowers carefully preserved in stasis containers. Professor Webb had emerged from the Sanctuary of Lost Souls to say goodbye, his own dragon companion beside him. "I knew the journal would find its way to someone who could finish what I started," Webb said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Take care of Roslyn and tell her that her brave sister changed the course of history." Celeste hugged her old professor, then turned to Thornix. Despite the heart flame crystal that would let them reunite whenever they wished, saying goodbye was still hard. "This isn't farewell forever," Thornix said, touching his snout gently to her forehead. "Go save your sister. I'll begin preparations on this side for the exchange program. And when you're ready, I'll be here. I'll be back soon," Celeste promised. "We have a lot of work to do, building bridges between our worlds. We have time," Thornix replied. "And now we have hope." Celeste stepped through the portal, the Everbloom flowers secured carefully. She emerged on Earth in the mountain facility where her journey had begun weeks ago. Scientists rushed forward with questions, but she held up a hand. "I need to get to the hospital. My sister needs me. Then I'll tell you everything." The Everbloom worked even better than the legends promised. Within hours of receiving the flower's essence, Roslyn began to recover. The doctors called it a miracle. Celeste called it love crossing dimensional boundaries. Epilogue, 6 months later. The newly established Embassy of United Realms stood on neutral ground. a building that existed simultaneously in both dimensions through a permanent portal maintained by the Heartflame crystal. Celeste, now officially Earth's ambassador to the Dragon Realm, stood on the balcony watching both skies, the blue of Earth and the violet of the Dragon Realm blending at the horizon. Thornix landed beside her. Having crossed over for their scheduled meeting with the first group of exchange students, 3 young dragons who wanted to study human engineering, and 3 human students who wanted to learn dragon magic. Nervous? Thornix asked, amusement coloring his mental voice. Terrified, Celeste admitted. What if we mess this up? Then we learn and try again, Thornix replied. That's what building bridges means. Sometimes they fall down, but we keep building. Roslyn, now fully recovered and serving as Celeste's assistant, poked her head out onto the balcony. They're here. The students just arrived. Both groups look equally scared and excited. Celeste took a deep breath and touched the Heartflame crystal around her neck, feeling its warmth and the bond it represented. She had crossed into the Dragon Realm seeking a cure for her sister. What she had found was so much more. Love that transcended species, purpose that gave meaning to her life, and the knowledge that impossible things could happen when hearts were brave enough to reach across divides. Ready? She asked Thornix. His amber eyes met hers, full of warmth and certainty. Always. Together they walked into the embassy to greet the students and begin the